Welcome, Elon family, to the first in a series of important conversations that we're calling Authentic Dialogue Toward Real Change. I'm Elon President Connie Book, and I'm joined by Dr. Randy Williams, Associate Vice President for Inclusive Excellence. First and foremost, we begin these dialogues so we can listen. So we can listen to those in our community who are experiencing pain and trauma about the horrific events taking place in our nation. We are committed to continuing action to make Elon University and our world a better place. And the best place to start is to hear from those who are directly impacted by systemic racism. If you're watching this on the Today at Elon website or on our Facebook site, we invite you to post your questions and comments. We will use your input for future episodes and try to address specific questions and concerns that are on your mind. For this first edition, it is appropriate to begin with the voices of Elon students. Dr. Williams, would you please introduce our panel today?
Thank you, President Book. Our four student panelists today are Jewel Tillman, a rising senior from Greensboro, North Carolina. Jewel is a political science major and an African-American studies minor. She is the president of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, vice president of the Elon African Society, and a member of the Elon Committee on History and Memory. Welcome, Jewel.
Thank you.
Also with us is Chuck Hanna, a rising junior from Brockton, Massachusetts. Chuck is a project management major, an orientation leader, and a member of the men's basketball team. Good to have you, Chuck.
Good.
We also welcome Eukela Little, a rising junior from Charlotte, North Carolina. She is a psychology major with minors in African and African-American studies and women's gender and sexuality studies. Eukela is a Lumen Scholar, an Odyssey Scholar, a student success coordinator in the Center for Race, Ethnicity, and Diversity Education, and a member of the President's Student Leadership Advisory Council. Good morning to you, Eukela.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
And we have Khaaliq Van-Otoo, a rising junior from Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania. Khaaliq is majoring in journalism with a sport management minor. He's a student coordinator in the CREED and leads the center's social justice branch. Good morning, Khaaliq.
Good morning, Dr. Will.
Great, lots of engagement here on campus, so thanks for all that leadership. So students, I'd like to begin today by listening to your thoughts about all that has been taking place in our nation since George Floyd was killed by Minneapolis police on May 25th. So Khaaliq, I'll turn to you to get us started.
Okay, thank you, President Book. Over the last several days, I've really gone through a lot of emotions. So it's kind of been a bit of a roller coaster, to be honest with you. And many of you probably know that yesterday was actually George Floyd's funeral. And so I felt like I was finally getting to a place where the emotions weren't so raw around everything that was going on. But I got to be honest with you, watching his family and watching his daughter, I found myself having tears in my eyes on a number of occasions yesterday while watching the tributes and services that were paid to him. And, it's really because not only will his death, I think, bring a lot of good, hopefully, and a lot of change for the better. But it's just very sad that another mother has buried her son, and a little girl is now fatherless for a senseless reason. And so from that standpoint, I feel very sad today. As a 20-year-old Black man in America, I can recall the stories of Emmett Till from the 1950s. I can recall the stories in the video of Rodney King being beaten by police in 1991. I can recall in 2012 when I personally first got the message from this justice system in our country, that a 17-year-old Black man's life doesn't matter when Trayvon Martin's killer was able to walk away free. And so I've also noticed the desensitization that has developed in me since then of the countless videos of Black and brown people being strangled, gunned down, and executed in broad daylight by the people who are supposed to protect us the most. And so I say all this just to say that I feel when you turn on the TV, on the news, when you look on social media, when you look to the streets today, there's a sense of urgency and a heightened energy that is, I think, is very palpable right now. And I really concur with that sense of urgency because I truly believe that the conversations that we have today and the actions, the pointed actions that we take today or tomorrow could not only just bring us an end to injustice, help us in our war against racism, but it can save lives because the fact of the matter is that it could be me one day. It could be someone that I love, someone that I care about. And so I'm just really happy to be here and be a part of this conversation because I truly believe that, like I said, the conversations that we have today and the real actions that we take can save lives here at Elon and all over this country.
Who would like to jump in next? Thank you, Khaaliq.
I guess I'll go next. So it's been tough for me personally because there was a lot of information that was being thrown my way that I was getting from social media and I was getting from the actual incident itself. And it became really overwhelming. And then there was a sense of pressure I had on myself to speak out and say something. And I still haven't even found the words to put together to even like publicly sort of come out and say anything. But I guess the biggest realization that hit me was I have a lot of friends that are white as well. And it was just that like my life expectancy is kind of more day to day compared to theirs, no matter what lifestyle they live. And it's tough because as a 21-year-old, as a kid that's pretty tall and with the physical profile that I have, I feel like I'm kind of like public enemy number one in terms of like being considered a threat if I were to run into police or anybody that has any sort of hatred towards people that may look like me. So it's been kind of hard trying to realize that. And I mean, I've never really kind of been the person to think about how good it is to wake up every day. But that realization and seeing that video made me realize like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it throughout the whole day if I were to encounter this cop or that cop. So it's just that realization that of having a target on my back as soon as I walk out the door, even if I'm on campus, is what's been very scary for me personally, and just being able to grapple with that. But I think the conversations that I've been having and like this open dialogue and some of the actions that I've been talking about with other people, that I think that there's a real hope for change. And I'm trying to keep that hope alive because at this point, like my sort of hope for better has really been diminished, and it's kind of hanging by like a little thread. So I think the people that I've been talking to have just been trying to like keep me on the right track, but that gets harder and harder the more I see more instances of these kind of basically like murders going on. And it just feels bad that there's no real history I can look at as evidence that these cops are going to get convicted, because that was my initial instinct. And that feeling is just like disheartening for me personally. So it's just been a really tough time, but I'm getting through it little by little, but again, just like one day at a time and trying to make change within one person at a time within your small group. It's going to hopefully make it better for everybody else.
Thank you.
I would first like to start off by saying that Black Lives Matter. And through the events that happened over the past couple of months, we've seen many different people be murdered and killed, whether by cops and by institutional racism. So George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade. Those are just some of the names that come to mind. Sandra Bland, when I think about institutional racism and police brutality as well. So for me, it has been a lot to adjust and sit with myself and reflect on what it is this country is doing to combat that. And it has been enlightening to see different people rise up and see a revolution starting to change these systems. And that has probably been my biggest piece of hope that I see coming from this. We're seeing international involvement with people saying Black Lives Matter. And that is important, because when you say that, you're not just saying that we're going to consider, you know, everyone, but until Black Lives Matter in this society, it shows that no, we can't get real justice, we can't get real change until everyone believes that. So I have been happy to see that, and I hope the momentum continues for the movement. And I can imagine that it's hard for Black people, Black folks going to school if they're doing summer classes or going to work on a daily basis, still trying to do their job and also sit in their emotions, sit in their anger, sit in their uncertainty about everything that is happening today. And I would just ask that white allies and other people of color, be sure that you give those people space. Be sure that you are very considerate of others' emotions, and that's just not with people of color or Black people, but be considerate of other people's emotions in this trying time. And we're working towards dismantling institutional racism, hopefully, in the end.
Dr. Book, could you repeat the question?
Really just about your reaction personally since the killing of George Floyd, you know, what your thoughts have been and your experience.
Yeah. I think for myself is just tired. As Khaaliq was referring to all these different killings, I was like, oh wow, I remember those. I remember those as well. And I think I was probably in middle school when hearing about Emmett Till, which was a shocker to me because I was like, why didn't we learn about this before? I was in middle school when the killing of Trayvon Martin occurred. And I think as I've continued to learn more and more about what actually goes on in this country, or what we're told goes on in this country, the only feeling I can recall is just being tired. Both mentally, emotionally, and I think that's transpired over to it turning into physical tiredness. Yeah, I think it's gotten to the point for myself with hearing about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and Tony McDade, where it's just, I find it hard to do day-to-day things. So like listening to me, like small things, like I like listening to music when I'm driving, or watching YouTube or things like that. Like, it's like, how do I continue like a quote unquote normal, a sense of normalcy, and knowing that all of these things are going on to people that look like me, to people that have raised me, to people, or that look like the people that have raised me, to look like my little sister or my little cousins, like that consistent reminder, and just being hyper vigilant everywhere I go, being attentive of like when I work out now, what times I work out, when I go to work out, just things that I feel like I shouldn't have to worry about, or things that I'm consistently being reminded of and being worried about every day. Like when I go to the store, am I going to get harassed? If I'm working out too late, am I going to get harassed? Like all these different thoughts, and just being bombarded with. The only thing I can just say is just it's tiring.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Williams, did you want to share on your thoughts too? It's this initial question.
Yeah, you know, so I'm a little bit older than our student colleagues in this session here. So, you know, having experience and actually been there, and remember seeing 1992, Khaaliq, when you referenced the Rodney King incident and the LA riots and the uprising from that acquittal of those 4 police officers in LA. I see a lot of heads nodding, and as each of you were speaking, and I think we can all relate to that and feel some of those emotions of being overwhelmed, pressure, the distraction, the hypersensitive vigilance that you experience. And so those emotions certainly sit with me as well. Having been am an African-American male, one who identifies as an African-American male in this country, I've had my experiences with police where I am just tense for no reason. Well, actually, there is a reason, obviously, right? We've seen historically there is some concern for us to have. And I have found myself in those same situations where I'm like, okay, I just want to get home. I just want to get home safely. So I can relate to a number of the emotions. And then as a professional, as one who's passionate about education, to be in this space with students whom I serve, so I report to the provost and to the president, but I work for students. And the same with the President Book, she reports to the board, but she works for students. And so I'm sure she shares some anguish as well, hearing the experiences of you all, just like I do, and just want to do things to make it better for where you are in your respective places and at Elon, of course. So it's a little bit of what I want to share. I don't want to take up too much airtime.
Thank you for that, Dr. Williams. And I agree. I don't want to take up too much airtime, and Jess will echo and really also the observation about tired that you all shared. And I feel that same way, that this sense of, because I do believe, Khaaliq, in the power of education, like you said, that to me is where I believe the hope lives. And to be in a similar space that I was in college with, to be honest, the same things happening. And it can feel hopeless, exhausting, and just the act of listening to music on the radio, lost, right? This, because of the weight of this experience. And so I really appreciate those observations, and they ring true to me about of this, the reality of the moment we're in, and hope, and trying to feel hopeful, Chuck, about what happens next, when you have seen this. So thank you for sharing those observations. So this next part is really open platform about questions you may have, and we too will ask questions, but I open it up to what's important right now, and what's on your mind. What are things that you want to share right now, or questions you want to ask?
Is this in reference to the university or just in general?
Whatever you would like, whatever it's on your mind, your heart.
I would say, speaking as an athlete, that this is kind of especially tough because personally I feel that I'm kind of like an animal in a sense, where there's not really much that fans know about me personally. It's more just about the number I wear and my last name on the back. So I guess it's just kind of tough for me to see what opportunities we can do to get to know, like for fans to get to know us personally as people rather than basketball players or football players or whatever sport that they play. So for instance, like I think Night of the Phoenix personally has a lot of potential for that to happen. And I think that I would like for that to be some sort of a change in terms of just being able to talk with the donors and everything, because again, like they do help with the athletic department in a really big way. And I think it'd be good for the athletes and for the donors to get to know each other at a deeper level than that's just the typical, like, how are you doing? What are you majoring in? Like kind of like really getting into like the nitty gritty stuff that really developed our relationship. So when they do support you at games, like you see them more as for who they are, not just as the donor. They just don't see us as the athlete.
Good point. I like that, Chuck.
Mm-hmm. For the other students who may not be familiar, Night of the Phoenix is this big event that we have once a year where donors and it's a fundraising for athletic scholarships, but it's last a couple of hours. And I love that idea that it could be more about getting to know each other than just raising money.
I think for myself is like, as I'm thinking about ways we could improve, especially as we enter the fall this year, with the report just being released, I believe 2 days ago, about how the fall is going to look. And just with also this being an election year, I think we could be, as an institution, more proactive with what is essentially going to happen during this time, especially for students of marginalized identities. I think just planning what going to school in the middle of a pandemic is going to look like, on top of what does going to school during an election year in the United States look like, and just brainstorming how can we create spaces for students of marginalized identities, so that they already feel supported, versus waiting until they tell us that they don't, or that we don't, and then having to brainstorm ideas mid-semester.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Upro, if you all continue thinking with your thoughts, we want to hear from you, and maybe some little prodding that will help in just thinking about your particular experiences at Elon. I mean, you came into Elon with a certain set of expectations. Curious to know from your experience, how have those expectations been met, and generally, what has been your experience as a Black student at Elon University?
Yeah.
I mean, I would say mine's is a little underwhelming, and as a Black student, because I feel like, because I'm an athlete and I kind of have my own schedule that's very like precise, like you have to be here and here at such and such times, that I haven't been able to sort of develop the relationship with the creed and the African American resources that are available. And it really took me almost like a year and a half to really even discover what the creed was and where it was and what it was about. But I think that that's been like the difficult part for me, is just trying to develop the relationships outside of basketball, because I have my teammates and they're great and I love them. But I also know that college is about connecting with people all around the world and different people. And I don't think that I've been able to do that at the level that I want to do that at in my 2 years, well, going on 3 years here. So I was able to apply for orientation leader just to kind of get those connections going. And I want to further kind of develop the relationship with the creed, between the creed and the athletic and athletes that identify as minorities. So that's just been my sort of motivation going into the next year, just to hopefully improve my sort of stance so far with my 2 years here at Elon.
I would say for me personally, as a Black identified student, I also identify as a first generation college student and a first generation or a Odyssey scholar as well. And upon coming to Elon and applying to Elon, I was made aware of the resources that were available to students of color and no socioeconomic status. And those resources have been very helpful to me at Elon. And I have been very acquainted with folks in the creed who have reached out their hearts, their time, their kindness to really help guide me and shape my experience as a student of color here at Elon. But one thing that I could say I'm kind of disappointed in, or something that has drawn my attention, is, to be honest, Elon loves to have conversation and have dialogue. And I know personally for myself, I have sat in probably over 5 discussions with probably President Book and Dr. Dooley, and a lot of higher administrative staff. And we have had discussions. What is race and what does your experience look like as a Black student? What can we do better? I know we have given recommendations, whether it's in capacity of the history and memory committee I'm on, or having Creed sit down fireside chats in that capacity. So it kind of is disheartening when we are still stuck at a discussion level of action and not already taking the recommendations we have and have used probably before 2016, before I even came to this school, to where we can push forward on a different level other than just discussion based, and see real action coming from those recommendations that Black students have given. So that is one thing that has kind of came up, especially in this time for me, where I was disappointed in some of the actions and reactions I have seen from the university.
I think for myself, in addition to what Joel was saying, Odyssey and the Creed have been very prevalent in my past here at Elon for these past 2 years. But specifically, I know as there's talk about the Odyssey program growing, and as well as admissions-wise, we're talking about getting more students of color, more marginalized students, specifically more Black students on campus. These two departments are overworked and understaffed. I know as a student coordinator in the Creed, there's 3 professional staff right now, and with them being in charge of educating students on these type of topics, educating staff and faculty on these type of topics, that becomes a lot of work. As a student coordinator, we can do some of these to a certain extent, but again, we aren't Kia, we aren't Ty, we aren't Sylvia. And so I think that's kind of been where I've been disappointed, because I feel like Elon has a lot of potential to grow, especially in this type of work. As Joel is saying, we talk a lot about equity, we talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, but I think when people hear those things, it's like, oh, that's just a discussion. Oh, we need to just sit down and educate people on race. But this work, especially as I've delved into it as a student coordinator, as I've delved into it as an academic, it's actual work. We can't just become complacent with just saying, oh, we are becoming diverse, or oh, we're having these discussions. Again, as someone who is working in this as a research student, someone who's working in this as a student employee, it's actual work. It may look different for like this type of work looks different compared to other departments, but I think we as an institution need to realize that it goes past discussions, and it looks different than work in other departments, but it's actual work, and it needs to be prioritized as much as other goals and departments prioritize their work. So.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you go ahead. I was just to say, to go on your point of, prioritizing the work, it is proactive work. It's not just we wait for something to happen and we give feedback and we start work from what has happened. Equity and racial work should be proactive work. And that's something I've been kind of delving in on, like, where are places that we can go ahead and put a cushion there, because we know this may be an issue coming up, or this could lead to something. And I think that is a big part of why the university and Dr. Book was very much in support of doing the history and memory committee, where we could kind of reconcile what has happened in the past in order to have a plan for the future. With that being said, I just had a question. What ways did you all, the university, anticipate that the plans for the this fall coming up would what would that look like for Black students? And do you anticipate any ways that Black students may be either negatively or positively impacted in their experience at Elon?
I'll jump in, President Book, if it's okay, and then you can fill in. Sure. Thanks for that question, Jewel. I think it's definitely a question that other students will want to know, parents will want to know, alumni, and all caring people about what's happening on campus will want to know. So I think it's important for us to address that. So I am one who likes to remain very hopeful, However, I also respect embracing the brutal realities. And so Eukela outlined that we're in a pandemic situation where people are more physically isolated and not together. We are also in a situation of heightened recognition and attention to racism, systemic racism in our society. And then it is also a presidential election year. And so we have a trifecta situation going on where we could have the brewing of a lot of contention for students of color, faculty, staff of color, and others. So it's certainly a setting for us to be cognizant of. And we, as senior administrators, have been having conversations for sure and thinking about planning to engage partnerships, true activist partnerships. So getting to this from the sense of just simply the words of ally, but active partners in the work that needs to be done. So I'm really heartened, Jewel, to have received and been in part of communications with several faculty members who are using the language of anti-racism. That really gives me hope, because that's not a term that I've heard a lot in spaces in my time at Elon. But to know that we're actually saying anti-racism, now is the time for us to help support faculty, staff, and students to make manifest of the concepts of anti-racism, so that we can in turn give some greater security to our students who are on campus, Black and other students of color, and marginalized students as well, broadly, that we are working and we have the security in place to address and not let these issues of contention to go unnoticed and unresponded to. So it's very important that you ask that question. I'm thankful for it. And I'm also heartened too by the amount of programs and plans that I've seen from academic departments, entire schools talking about anti-racist work. And that's something that we really need to name. This is what the situation we're in. So let's go ahead and name anti-racist work that needs to be done.
Yeah, I appreciate the questions too, Randy. I like the prompt that you gave me, Joel, so about prioritizing, and because in my work, and a lot of this is this moment, and I'm going to be really frank here and describe a moment I had as a leader here at Elon. And so we have every year a call for budget items. And Elon's an independent private. So that means that all of our revenue is generated by Elon. So there's no state funding or, outside funding. So we do it all. And every year we have a call for budget items. And so that's that moment you're describing, where we're going to ask ourselves, what's the most important thing we can do? And how much tuition increase are we going to tolerate? How many new students are we going to try to grow to cover these additional costs, right? Or what are we going to cut? I mean, so when you were talking, I was thinking about this moment, and it determines the pace of change in a lot of ways. Now, you can do a lot with heart and mind, but the truth is that, and what Eukela was saying about people and staffing. So that's not heart and mind work. That's actually hiring and prioritizing budget items. And so it is exactly that moment. And I know that I've been having a lot of sleepless nights in the last 2 weeks thinking about how we prioritize budget items. And last year, I can remember a moment I had around first generation. And we hired an additional staff, our first staff person, to support first generation. And it was one of those tension moments. Am I going to do X or am I going to do X? And then I had it again because of COVID and the financial impact of that to the university. We have had a budget freeze, and all vacant positions were frozen. So that included a creed position. And I had it again, that moment, that tension, because quite honestly, it's a tuition increase. You're trying to balance cost and need, and it's tough. It's tough. But what these events have done is, this is why I'm hopeful, like Dr. Williams said. I think we're listening in a different way. and we understand that systemic racism is built into that budget, right? And so you're looking at that budget saying, what do I not see? You know, and I think that is one of the powerful things, as Khaaliq was saying about outcomes from this, is I think a lot of people, white people, are saying, what don't I see? You know, and that's a really critical question if we're going to move forward, for people to be asking about structures and policies and process right now. So Khaaliq, I know you had something up, so I'll pass that to you.
No, it's no problem. I think, I was gonna kind of piggyback off Chuck because I heard him talking about being seen. And in my experience here at Elon, I have to say, it's really been a blessing to me. I'm a journalism major in the communications department. And I think the professors there, the leadership there is strong, great relationships with them. It's a beautiful campus, obviously. So I've enjoyed my time here. The Creed is, I feel like, my family, my support system. I love the staff in there. But when you're going to a university where you're only 5% of the student population, and the white percentage is 80%, so that's about, for every 7 students, 112. For every 7 Black students, that's about 112 white students. And so there's a feeling of it being a little bit of a bubble, I think, in terms of, we have a lot of programs in the Creed. The Black community here, I think, is very strong, and is very, I'll say, active in terms of trying to educate ourselves and the rest of the Elon community on these issues. But I do think there's a little bit of a disconnect with the rest of the university in terms of not a lot of engagement from the majority on this campus. And so, you know, there's a little bit of a tension there in terms of how we can move forward. One of the things also that I want to talk about in terms of being seen is, I heard, I think it was Joel talking a little bit about a task force or a group that was put together to look into the history of Elon. Is that true? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I could, but Joel, you probably could as well. We stood that up in last year as a university-wide effort to be more transparent and honest about the university's history, and Joel serves on that committee.
Got you. And like, what was the specific goal or outcome of that committee?
Yes, so the Elon History and Memory Committee was a 2-year committee. And what we have done within the 2 years, of course, I wasn't here this last semester, but I was here for the other semesters. Our primary goal was to look into the history and ways that we can reconcile that history. So it's reconciliation work, memorization work, and our ultimate goal was to give recommendations to the university of how best to go about that, whether that's renaming buildings, whether that's doing other things. So we would create a recommendation list to present to the university and have them look at that. And we have also, as a result of creating this committee, Elon University has joined the University Studying Slavery. So that is really a big accomplishment, because not only is Elon doing this work, but we have joined other universities to see what they are doing to investigate and look at their procedures and how they are also handling their work as well. And I hope that that recommendation list that is presented from the committee is taken well. And I'm not sure, as I said, I wasn't here this last semester when the recommendations were supposed to be presented, but I do hope that that was able to be completed and finished and given to the university.
Well, I think it's about to happen. They're just wrapping it up, and they got delayed a little with COVID-19 to be able to finish it before the end of the semester. But I'm anticipating those, and it's an educational effort to to tell our history that hasn't been told as well, and to be more honest. Eukela was talking about not realizing that about Emmett Till until I think you said 7th grade or 8th grade.
Middle school.
Middle school, yeah. I mean, and this is the outcome of what we know is an unwritten history, and systemically unwritten. on purpose. Like that's not an accident. And acknowledging that and being able to tell the power of those stories so that we can embrace it and have a better future is the why the committee was formed.
I just want to jump in and add to that, and in addition to the History and Memory Committee, there's also a subgroup within the History and Memory Committee that Jewel referenced. A small group has joined the University Study in Slavery, which is a consortium that started at the University of Virginia and a number of colleges and universities across the country. And our focus has been here at Elon and with our subcommittee is to have an explicit focus on anti-Black racism from a historical perspective, as well as a manifestation throughout contemporary time. So recognizing that we can have a deep and true historical view and collection of memories without understanding race and the centrality of Black people in that history. So I just wanted to share that with you as well, colleagues, so that you can have great information. And we are anticipating those recommendations, that report, Jewel. So we're looking forward to getting that information.
No, that's really encouraging. I think Jewel hit on something that I was going to bring up, but I imagine and hope it's going to be in the recommendation. But one thing that's a little bit unsettling for me as a Black student on campus is the kind of whispers and stories I've heard surrounding the legacy and history of some of the people these buildings are named after, some buildings on campus. And so I've heard things about Harper, which is in Colonnades, and I've heard some unsettling things about a long family, which the sports management building is named after in terms of their history with the KKK and involvement in lynch mobs. And I just think that you can't run away or change your history, but I do think you need to learn from it. And when you have a message that is talking about welcoming more Black students and you're saying that that is one of your top agenda things, it's tough to kind of reconcile having an atmosphere that's welcoming to Black students when you have names of buildings that were, against their even existence on this campus. So hopefully that'll be a recommendation from that group. But I'm very encouraged that that group is already doing the work. So.
Yeah. And Khaaliq, I encourage you to continue asking questions about it. When you return here in the fall and you share your knowledge of this committee and these set of recommendations with not just your Black friends and your peers, but also inquiring with faculty members and staff and mentors and advisors that you have. Ask if they're aware of this and what their thoughts on this to generate conversations about it. And this is also a way to further ensure a sense of accountability as well, so that the more we talk about it, the more of a real thing that it will be. And so our collective engagement as partners in this, because we are all humans, right? I mean, we're imperfect humans to go further. And so we have to rely on a sense of community to hold us accountable in the sense of growing together. So I encourage you to do that this fall, Khaaliq.
Definitely.
Great.
And also with what Khaaliq was saying about like the different names of certain buildings and certain questions we have, I think there's also there would be a great effort or a stride if Elon could look at places on campus where Black students do not feel welcome. Where Black students, where they go and then they move from. And particularly, I was an RA in historic neighborhood, and I can identify that I was in historic neighborhood for 2 years as an RA. And I know for sure that one year we probably had around 10 Black people in historic that were residents and not RAs. And by the end of that year, we probably went down to 4 Black people in the neighborhood because it was not a good environment, a conducive environment for their well-being, for their mental health, because of some of the things they had to undergo being in that neighborhood, which is predominantly white. And it is an all first-year neighborhood. And I think it would be a great advantage for if we're being proactive and if we're being anti-racist, for Elon to do a mapping out of his locations on campus and certain areas where people of color can go where they don't feel welcome. And why is that? Why is this happening? Why are people moving? Why do people not go to this location? Why are people of color not in this major? I think that would be very beneficial for Elon and also anti-racist work.
So Joel, so I make sure I understand, you're saying that our data would show that Black students had requested to move out of that space.
Yes, yes.
That's really
just from my experience, at least. I know my first year I was a Carolina RA. There was no Black women in the Carolina residence hall other than myself. And if you're in HBB, I've seen that as well, where we have RAs who are Black and who are there to represent and, help our students through whatever they may be going through in the historic neighborhood. But I can say from fact that Black students do not feel welcome in the historic neighborhood, and it's for and for myself personally, it's not a place that I would want to be or want to live out my first years at Elon, because you are very disconnected from, I want to say, reality. Being around and surrounded with first years who are white, it is it's different, it's challenging, and it's hard. And I would have to say that would be something the university should look into, why this is happening. And also, students have said they don't feel comfortable at the business school because it's majority white, cis male. So I've heard Black students discuss that as well. So there's a lot of spaces on campus that we should feel welcome and should feel like we should be able to go and have that same connection and do what we need to do.
Yeah, Jewel, that's great. I mean, you raised something about the concept of space. I mean, physical space, emotional, community space, very important for any person, regardless of identity. But people need to have a sense of community and space and physical space. So, Elon, we have over 3.1 million square footage of space that we occupy. And what I'm hearing in this conversation here, and students referencing the space in where Odyssey and the Mooney Building or in Creed, and I've heard other students of color talk about El Centro as well. Of that 3.1 million square footage of space, there should be more places and spaces where students of color can feel a sense of ownership and that they can thrive and be in. Certainly in the dining hall, and surely in your residence hall, you should have a sense of, this is my space and I feel comfortable being here. So I really appreciate that. And I want to share too that this summer we are going to release, one of the things that we're doing is doing a scan of data. We're creating a dashboard. President Book has been a huge champion of this, a dashboard so that we can see, pick out moments throughout the time to look at spaces through academic programs, to look at physical space, to look at representation of several identities, athletics, sororities and fraternity membership, several categories that we're taking a look, and we will have this dashboard, and President Book and I will have access to this so that we can pull up and see, what do we look like on this particular day and how are things situated? And that will inform us to keep giving us a pulse, better from a data perspective as well, that will be buttressed with the stories like you're sharing, Jewel, that will help us to say, okay, we really need to take some action in this particular area. So thanks for raising that.
Thank you.
I know as Khaaliq and Joel were talking, I thought of, and I guess this kind of goes back to just being transparent with history, specifically with Elon history. But I know for myself, especially with this past year, for my sophomore year working in the Creed, and seeing how the pro staff do trainings, and I know Khaaliq works with Deep, and as a student coordinator, he does a few trainings himself. But I would love to see some implementation of equity or diversity education university-wide, even if it's just as a first-year foundation. I know that we've kind of talked about this a little bit. I believe either Dr. Dooley or Dr. Williams may have came to an event, and I know that either of them shared that on a faculty staff level, there are trainings that are held, but they aren't required. I do feel like as as we are in a private institution, I do feel that we have a lot of resources on things, and I think this work in education goes past this work in education goes past a political stand. And that is it's something that is a matter of, like Dr. Williams was saying, a matter of these spaces, mental, physical, emotional spaces that and burdens that students of color have to carry in not only educating themselves on an academic level, but also having to educate others on, hey, this is how I want to be treated in these spaces. And I feel like if we could again go back to prioritizing where we are spending these funds, if we could include some type of learning into like the first year foundation, or and throughout all these requirements that we have to do as Elon students as a whole, like if we could include some of that into the learning already, I think that would take a load off of the Creed, off of the student coordinators that work in the Creed, and off of students of color, specifically Black students in this case, and having to educate people in every space that we go on, hey, this is how I would like to be interacted with, or this is how you talk to me as a person versus just, something. So I would love to see this type of work being done, especially considering our demographic as a university. I feel like we get an influx of students from the North. And I feel like there's this preconceived notion that, the North was the industrial and then the South is the Confederacy. And so that they feel this disconnect, but I do feel like it's imperative that, okay, yes, you may be coming from the North and coming into the South. So it's still as a means of being transparent and open with what our history is in the South. That should be a part of like the first year foundation, or just woven in there somewhere. As I see, it would take a burden off of the faculty and students of color. And with that, I will say, instead of like, I know for global and Elon 101 that a lot of different professors could, but I think it would do a lot more harm than good if just anyone was doing this. So equipping those types of topics and classes with people who have the vocab and have the knowledge to teach this outside of the professors and pro staff we have in the Creed to do so. Because again, I do feel like they're overworked and understaffed, and I do feel like it just creates more responsibility for the Black faculty and staff to have to do that.
Eukela, go ahead, Dr. Williams.
I was going to second what Eukela said. I really agree with her greater emphasis on anti-bias and anti-racist education. I think I saw in an email that was sent out recently, I think maybe by Dr. Dooley, that is going to be a part of the first year learning experience for the incoming class, but I definitely think that's something that should be the case for every incoming class.
Thank you for that, Khaaliq. I was gonna just respond to Eukela that I realized that we have put so much emphasis on global education and multicultural education around global diversity, and less on domestic race and history and the things that you describe. And this speaks back to this issue of prioritizing and how, and what steps, why did we do that, and what steps can we do to add and leverage the understanding around domestic diversity as also a critical piece of that intercultural competency that we're trying to teach.
Yeah. And often in spaces, as DEI spaces that I'm in, we talk about the concept of this nation's twin sins. So that is the genocide of indigenous people and the enslavement of African Americans. And so until we reconcile and get to that core foundational actions that were established at the founding of this country, then, we won't achieve what we hope and what we deserve to experience in our lives. And so education is certainly a space for that. And I'm so happy to see that two of you are ACE minors, and we have other minors where students can get some of this information and be transformed, not just by faculty of color, but we have a number of white faculty as well who are teaching in these spaces, as you all have experienced. So continue to promote the ACE minor, the poverty and social justice, and Latin American studies, Asian studies, leadership minors. So we have plenty of academic spaces too, because I agree that to bring about this change, we have to have an infusion in the classroom and in academic spaces.
I have a list I can bring up if that's okay. I got this thing. Okay. So one of the things that I know Jewel and I specifically were talking about was, as I guess a means of transparency, is working more with building community with the Alamance and Burlington community. Jewel, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
What was that? I'm sorry.
The Alamance and Burlington, like working more with the surrounding communities.
Yes, I think Alamance has a lot of history, a lot of good connection to Elon that we don't really consider. And I know, like, just from attending some of the protests in Alamance and hearing some of the people talk, I was like, wow, Alamance Burlington really has a deep connection to Elon University. And even with work with the Elon History and Memory Committee, we have started making those connections and reaching out to activists within the community. But I think it would do a lot of good if we highlight the stories of Burlington folks and Alamance folks and bring them into the conversation, because without Alamance, without Elon, without Burlington, Elon University would not be what it is today. And a lot of reconciliation has to go on with the citizens of this community and this county, as well as with Elon, because as you know, like, John Jeffries was lynched in the Alamance community, and that lynch mob was headed by William A. Harper, past president of Elon. So there is a lot of reconciliation work that could be coincided with Elon University and the Alamance community.
I also feel like that would help with a sense of belonging for Elon students. I know as students, and I'm pretty sure as senior staff and president, you all probably hear about how we refer to Elon as the bubble. So breaking past this Elon bubble, I know in a lot of my classes, especially my first year, a little less this past year, but I would hear, people referring to Burlington residents as Burleys. I was like, well, what is that? Like, we're in their community and referring to them as if that is a slur or something. So I was just like, as Jewel is saying, like, without Burlington, without Alamance County, there would be no Elon University. We get a lot of support from them. And so learning to approach their community and essentially our community with a sense of humility will also help with this, I guess, this barrier between, we're in Elon and then we'll go out to Burlington, because again, that's a big thing too out here in classes. When you cross over into Burlington, you're in Burlington. I'm like, well, it's like 2 miles down the road. So just keeping those things in mind, I think it would help again with that sense of community, with that sense of belonging for a lot of students here. So
yeah, that's great. And I think, Chuck, you probably interact with the community more than most students because of athletics and the support they come out for the game.
Yeah, like, I think that, speaking on the community aspect, I think that would be, I think the more we have interactions and things that involve sort of team building, because I think in order to initiate real change, it takes both sides to work together at a really high level. And so I think that for athletics, being able to do community service, any type of service, like, I know for the basketball team, we were able to volunteer in the food kitchen and help move furniture. So, like, that's our interaction with the community. And the more we can do that and kind of have those sort of initiations going on and those interactions going on, the better it will be for athletes and students.
I know some of you may work in the Village Project too, and in how inspired those young Black children are by our Elon Black students, I think is a very powerful moment. I watched that because I think it's one of those hopeful things that they see themselves going to college. And you're probably familiar, we have Elon Academy here. And it's where a lot of hope lives, is in the exchange of those relationships.
Yes. So I know for me personally, I worked with Elon Academy, this past, last summer. And now some of those mentees are my Odyssey mentees, which I find just, again, like it's helped me feel like, when saying that, I do say that from a personal testament, I do feel like I have another sense of belonging. Now I go out into Burlington and I see my mentees and I'm like, oh, hey. So yeah, I definitely think that that'll help increase the relations or better the relations between Elon students and the surrounding community.
Yeah, for me as well, I also work as an Elon Academy mentor, and I work through the semesters. So I help with finding the college application process. And this was my first year doing it, and it was an enlightening experience because a lot of these students have faced the same struggles as me, either being first gen or low socioeconomic status. It is enlightening, and a lot of them want to come to Elon. They love Elon, and they want the support of Elon. So that program is really beautiful and a true testament of, what else we could do going forward.
Yeah, well said.
So I have a question for you, Dr. Williams and Dr. Book. Dr. Williams sent us a report of, I believe it was looking at the progress made between 2016 and 2019. And just like reading through that, were there some things in particular, as you all are thinking about this work of equity and inclusion and diversity, that you all may have attempted that wasn't necessarily successful? I feel like as reading the report, we were seeing improvement, which was good, but what are some things that you all are just, how is this approach coming around going to be different than this past report?
Yeah. I'll start off, President Book. And Eukela, you're referencing the Presidential Task Force on Black Student Faculty Staff Experience that was launched. And we completed in 2015 and had an implementation that went throughout a period of time. We had our last update in June 2019. And I wanted to share, before I get deep into your question here, I want to share that a lot of those recommendations were driven by students. So students, we worked closely with students, not just for one-time gathering, but we held a series of gatherings with Black students to create a number of those recommendations. And we see the fruits of that. So we have made some progress in there, and I can celebrate those students who are now alumni who contributed to those recommendations, and we worked together to get them into that report. And in that report there, you see that we've had some growth over the last few years with Black student enrollment. And I think that's a testament to some of the emphasis from that task force report. Having a admissions counselor dedicated to Black student recruitment has been part of that. Engaging other stakeholders such as alumni and parents who have been promoters of Elon and speaking with prospective students and parents. And we're starting to see that. I was excited to see that this incoming class for the fall 2020 will have right now, we have the highest enrollment of deposits for Black students since 2011. So we're excited about that, and we're looking forward to building upon this. Part of this is our membership with the Common App, and we are able to generate a wider range of applicants and students, including Black students. So that's an area that we've had some success, but we want to do more. We feel that there are a number of Black students that will benefit from an Elon education, and we would love to embrace them. So it's a matter of us taking the steps toward reaching out to those communities. And some of the steps, such as joining the Common App and hiring staff with a unique focus on recruiting Black students, will be a part of that. We also have had success in the number of Black faculty to join Elon. Our latest numbers, we were hovering around 7%. And 7%, you might say, wow, that's small. But in the context of historically white institutions, 7% Black faculty is relatively high. But we want to continue with that, because at the end of the day, how does it feel? You know, it may be 7% and it may be high relative to other institutions, but how does it feel is what we want to focus on. And so that speaks to the climate. So we've got more work to do there. We've also raised more funds to offer scholarships to make an Elon education more accessible to Black students and others as well, to be quite honest. And so we've had successes there, and we're continuing with our Elon Leads campaign to generate more funds and have more initiatives that will support the enrollment and success of Black students. So that report, I hope others who are watching this will take some time to take a look at that update report to see what we have done over that time by students, faculty, and staff and administrators working together to generate recommendations, to actually implement recommendations, and to assess and report on those recommendations. So those are a little bit of what we've done in some areas that we need to improve. So we continue with the student enrollment, the faculty and staff hiring, as well as scholarship areas is where we could improve. So those are just some areas, but clearly if one was to deeply review that report, they could see that we can do other things.
And just to your question about, are there things not working in there? And I'll say two things. One is, and this speaks to Joel's question about pace of change. You know, I think everybody is conscientious about that, you know, that we want change, right? And the second piece would be, the number one concern I hear from students and alumni, Black students and alumni, is around white students' investment in understanding their experience. That, you know, when alumni look back and it was that issue. And, you know, so I know Dr. Amy Johnson, who runs our core curriculum, and they've been very conscientious about picking common readings that help to correct that. And I don't think we've had the success there that we want, right, that we need as a campus. And so how do you create more opportunity as well as more requirement that this be a part of a student's learning outcome at Elon? I think that it has not, in my opinion, been a place of where we want to be. We're not there yet.
I had a follow-up question to Dr. Williams. You mentioned that Elon is a part of the Common App. I also had a question is if Elon is also included in the free application week?
And President Book, you have to check me on this. We have participated and that's for state of North Carolina residents to participate in a consortium of other schools who offer a free application. We have done that in the past, and that has been a recent question, but I don't think we are currently participating in that. But this was a question that was raised in our Black Life Advisory Council last fall, and one that I know that we have had some discussions on about our revisiting that practice as well. So thankfully you've raised that question, and it's just another point of support in another place where we've heard that suggestion. So thanks, Joel.
I will say, Joel, that they are not active there, but they made a decision, we did as a university, that anyone who asks us to waive the application fee, we do. Okay. So and part of it is driven because the free application week I think it's North Carolina that is in North Carolina, but most of our applications are coming from out of state. And so we have just made it a practice. Anyone who would like to apply and ask us to waive the fee, we do.
Thank you.
We have just a few minutes left, and I wanted to ask if there's anything that we have not talked about that you would like to talk about before we close up our conversation.
I did have something, but if someone who hasn't spoken would like to speak?
I mean, mine isn't like something to talk about. Mine's is just, I think like Jill hinted at it in the beginning, just like the plan of action, like actually going through with it, because we can talk about this till the world falls apart, but at some point something has to give. And I think I understand the pace. I understand that there's patience that goes involved in that, but at the same time, it's just we can take the small steps in order to get to the big steps. And I haven't felt that when it came to things that talk about diversity, inclusion, race, that the small steps weren't taken. So the big steps, just like the overall goal never happened because there was no proactive steps being taken, as Jewel had said before. So it's just seeing, like, I'm curious to see the actions that follow and if it really kind of goes behind the things that are being said in this dialogue and future dialogues.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really emphasize that as well. I'd be remiss to not bring up that, I think you're probably aware there's a lot of people in the Black community here on campus who are pretty upset because of recent events going on around the country. And even some here at Elon. There was an instance where there was an issue with an Elon parent on the Facebook page, I think, with one of the students here at Elon, where a Black student's parent felt like they weren't welcome to speak up about Black Lives Matter because the majority in that group told her that that wasn't an Elon issue. There have been instances where Black women, Black men too, but specifically Black women on campus have been harassed by people and driving in trucks with Confederate flags. And that happened a lot last year. And so I think in this moment, like the Chuck said, this has been a great conversation. I don't doubt for 1 second the intentions of you, President Brooke, and you, Dr. Williams, but actions are going to speak much louder than words. And I'm very interested to see what are the real steps that Elon will take to bring about more equity, justice, and equality here on campus. And that includes enrollment as well, where we are one of the whitest schools in the country, and 80% white. And so I'm just very interested to see which tangible steps are going to be taken moving forward.
And Khaaliq, you mentioned some of the incidents that have happened at Elon and some of the issues that we face. And with that also, we're always told as Elon students to submit a bias report, submit this report here and it will be handled. But a lot of the times we aren't seeing how those issues are being handled behind the scenes. And it kind of goes as if it's not being handled at all because we don't see the action or what has come out of it. And I know that the bias report system, it says that Elon will handle bias incidents through grievance procedures and educational programs. But a lot of the times we don't know what that procedure looks like or what that educational program it consists of. And to that, a lot of the harassment or bias or racism that Black students and other people of color may face at Elon, it may not happen directly on campus. And a lot of that is happening on social media, as we have seen in some of group chats, we've seen on people's personal pages, their posts. And then you have physical incidents such as the white truck. But how are those incidents? What is the bias report system transparency look like? Can we offer more transparency in that system or some type of highlight to be taken out of it?
Yeah, I'm not surprised about that point, Joel. I think it's a valid one. I think we have improved the bias reporting system by first establishing one, making it online and having features such as anonymous submissions and so forth, and lots of things where you can upload pictures and images and video and all these things. But yet it's still not perfect. And so we're trying to create a system, a tool for our community to use in these unfortunate instances. But also we have to reconcile privacy, things that we're bound by law officials, so that we don't put Elon University in a situation where it jeopardizes ability to provide funds for students. And so we want to be very cautious of that. But you're right. point blank, you're right. We need to improve upon this system right here, and how can we make a better bias system that will be effective. One of those ways is I think we will have to do things such as Khaaliq and Chuck talked about, is move from dialogue to action. So when we can do that and we can breed more trust and more confidence in the system, then you will say, okay, I may not know the details of what happened in this bias case, but because I see the dialogue go to action in other spaces, I have a sense, I tend to believe that the university is doing what it says it's doing. So part of that is, we got to move from dialogue to action for sure, to help breed the trust and the confidence in the community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, good question.
I think for myself, as I'm thinking of closing comments and suggestions, just a reminder that Black lives aren't political, or they shouldn't be political. So going forth as an institution, I would like to see that us making a stance as an institution shouldn't be a matter of what someone is going to feel like when we're talking about lives. As we are making these statements about wanting to include Black students and Black faculty and Black staff, as we're making these statements about teaching equity and diversity, this isn't a political move. This isn't a performance. Just a reminder to the institution and to those who may be watching this, that this is literally a matter of students and faculty and staff lives, and our space and our being, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. So just keeping that in mind as, again, we're taking these dialogues into and moving them into action, that this shouldn't be a conversation of how will this look politically for us, because my life shouldn't be a matter of, do you believe in this or do you not believe this? My peers' lives should not be a matter of, do we believe that they should have this? Do we not? My professors, mentors, and the pro staff that have guided me should not be a matter. Their discussions, their jobs, and their lives should not be a matter of, is this the right political move? Like, this isn't a matter of politics anymore. And I think as we're going forth, again, as we've talked about that, just prioritizing this and using this as a sense of urgency, as we see with the many other projects that we see on Elon's campus, whether that be buildings or research funding or, I don't know, admissions, just all these different things. I would like to see a sense of urgency and prioritizing in that.
Very good, Eukela. And it speaks to our mission, right, around education, right, and making sure that all students experience a fullness of educational opportunity in an equitable environment. And that's our mission. So, this conversation today is really about, at Elon here, what could we do? What can we do? What more can we do? And taking action to do that because of the equity we want in that educational mission for all of our students, right? And so that is, I really appreciate that observation, because that's exactly very well said. Well, thank you very much for being our first group in this authentic dialogue exercise. I absolutely believe in the power of conversation to inspire change. And so I am very appreciative that you took time out today to do that. And to our viewers who are watching this dialogue, to the Elon community, I hope that you'll take time to submit questions for future dialogues. And maybe it's something that is lingering from this conversation as well, that you would like us to speak more to during our next conversation. So we'll be continuing these throughout the rest of the summer as we prepare for the fall reopening on campus. So thank you all for being with us today. I really appreciate it. Great to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. I'll just say quickly, thank you, Jewel and Khaaliq, and for Eukela, and how Chuck and how you all have just been so brave to be a part of this session, and to the viewers, just to support what the president stated. This video will be posted on Facebook and on Today at Elon website. So with that, there will be a form for you to add more questions or comments that will be used for upcoming episodes. So please feel free to go to those spaces and submit the form, and we'll be receiving that information. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Williams. And too, if you're like me, you might have a lingering thought after this conversation. I might too. And so I might be reaching out to all of you as we think through these actionable items we want to create from these dialogues as we prepare for the fall. So let me just echo my thanks with Dr. Williams for being here and being a leader in this. Thank you.